Hello everyone, you're very welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be answering the question, what is the best Europe ETF for European investors? To clarify what I mean by Europe ETF, these are ETFs which allow you to invest in the European stock market as a whole. So we're talking about getting exposure to European companies. In a recent video, we talked about the best S&P 500 ETFs for European investors. The S&P 500 Index, which the ETFs are based off, is widely regarded as the de facto index of choice when it comes to measuring the performance of the US stock market. Therefore, anyone looking to invest in the US stock market generally chooses an S&P 500 ETF to do so. The reason why I bring this up is because when it comes to measuring the performance of the European stock market, there are 4 indexes which are regarded as being representative of the market as a whole. These are the FTSE Developed Europe Index, the MSCI Europe Index, the STOXX Europe 600 Index, and the Solactive GBS Developed Markets Europe Large and Mid Cap Index. So unlike the S&P 500 video, which compared ETFs that were all tracking the same index, this video will be comparing ETFs that track 4 separate indexes. But all of these indexes provide broad exposure to European companies, which is what matters. I'm going to approach this comparison by discussing the top ETFs for each of the 4 European indexes. These ETFs are offered by some of the most popular ETF providers in Europe. For each ETF, I'll highlight the ETF's total expense ratio, the ETF's domicile status, the structure of the ETF's dividend status, and the European brokerage platforms that the ETF is available on. If after watching this video you want to get started investing in Europe ETFs but you don't have a brokerage account, you can try out brokers like the Giro, Book Zero, Trade Republic, or Trading 212 using the links in the video description. If you want to learn which of these brokers is the best for European investors, check out the video popping up on screen after this one. Let's kick things off with Europe ETFs that track the FTSE Developed Europe Index. Vanguard has 2 such ETFs that I want to discuss. First up is the Vanguard FTSE Developed Europe UCITS ETF Euro Accumulating, ticker symbol VWCG. The ISIN for this ETF is IE00BK5BQX27. The expense ratio for this ETF is 0.10% or 10 basis points, meaning for every €1,000 invested into this ETF, €1 will go to fees. The ETF is domiciled in Ireland and is structured as a physical ETF, meaning the ETF actually owns the underlying stock investments. As the name suggests, the ETF is an accumulating ETF, meaning any dividends received by the ETF from the underlying stocks will be reinvested rather than paid out to the ETF shareholders. This is more tax efficient as the ETF shareholder would have to pay tax on the dividend received from the ETF if the ETF decided to pay out its investment income. VWCG is available on the Giro and Trade Republic, but not on Trading 212 or Book Zero. The counterpart to this ETF is the Vanguard FTSE Developed Europe UCITS ETF Distributing, ticker symbol VEUR. The ISIN for this ETF is IE00B945VV12. The only difference between VEUR and VWCG is the fact that VEUR is a distributing ETF, meaning any dividends received by the ETF from the underlying stocks will be distributed to the ETF shareholders rather than being reinvested. Dividends from this ETF are paid out on a quarterly basis, and as we previously mentioned, the ETF shareholder will have a tax liability to account for on the dividends paid. Just with regards to the FTSE Developed Europe Index itself, it's composed of 570 European companies spanning 16 countries in Europe. The index, as at the 31st of December 2022, had a dividend yield of 3.23% and a net market cap of €8.8 trillion. The top 10 companies in the index, including Nestle, AstraZeneca, and Shell, accounted for 21% of the total value of the index as at 31 December 2022. Next up are ETFs tracking the MSCI Europe Index. The 2 best-in-class ETF providers for the MSCI Europe Index are HSBC and iShares. Let's start with HSBC. HSBC offers 2 ETFs which track the MSCI Europe Index. The first of which is the HSBC MSCI Europe UCITS ETF Euro Accumulating. accumulating. Ticker symbol HMES. The ISIN for this ETF is IE000ZQOIPB1. The expense ratio for this ETF is 0.10% or 10 basis points. The ETF is domiciled in Ireland, structured as a physical ETF, and is accumulating. Now, here's the strange thing about this ETF. When I went to search for it on DeGiro, Book0, Trade Republic, and Trading 212, it wasn't there. It is a relatively new fund. According to the fact sheet, it has an inception date of July 12th, 2022, and it's supposedly trading on the London Stock Exchange, Borsa Italiana, and Euronext Paris. So I don't know if it's just a case that the brokerage platforms haven't yet made this ETF available, because if you go onto the Borsa Italiana site, for example, you can see the latest price data for the ETF. Hopefully this ETF does become available on all major brokerage platforms, because at a total expense ratio of 10 basis points, this ETF is the cheapest MSCI Europe accumulating ETF available. The counterpart to this ETF is the HSBC MSCI Europe UCITS ETF Euro Distributing, ticker symbol HMEU. The ISIN for this ETF is IE00B5BD5K76. Again, the only difference between HMEU and HMES is the fact that HMEU is a distributing ETF. HMEU pays out a dividend on a semi-annual basis, i.e. once every 6 months. Unlike HMES, which seems to be a ghost, HMEU is available on DeGiro, Trading 212, and Trade Republic, but not Book0. Now let's take a look at the iShares alternatives. Similar to HSBC, iShares offers 2 ETFs which track the MSCI Europe Index. The first of which is the iShares Core MSCI Europe UCITS ETF Euro Accumulating, ticker symbol EUNK. The ISIN for this ETF is IE00B4K48X80. The expense ratio for this ETF is 0.12% or 12 basis points. The ETF is domiciled in Ireland, structured as a physical ETF, and is accumulating. Prior to the inception of the HSBC accumulating fund in 2022, EUNK was the cheapest accumulating ETF which tracks the MSCI Europe Index. But unlike the HSBC fund, EUNK is available on DeGiro, Book0, Trade Republic, and Trading 212. This is frustrating for investors looking for the lowest total expense ratios. You might have to settle for the slightly more expensive iShares fund if the HSBC fund isn't readily available on your brokerage platform, or any brokerage platform for that matter. The counterpart to this ETF is the iShares Core MSCI Europe UCITS ETF Euro Distributing, ticker symbol IMEU. The ISIN for this ETF is IE00B1YZSC51. IMEU is distributing, whereas EUNK is accumulating. IMEU pays a dividend on a quarterly basis, i.e. once every 3 months. IMEU is also available on all major brokerage platforms. With regards to the MSCI Europe Index itself, it's composed of 426 European companies spanning 15 countries in Europe. The index covers 85% of the total value of the European developed market. The index, as at 31 December 2022, had a net market cap of $9.2 trillion, which would closely equate to the 8.8 trillion euro covered by the FTSE Developed Europe Index. The top 10 companies in the index, again including the likes of Nestle, AstraZeneca, and Shell, accounted for 22.5% of the total value of the index as at 31 December 2022. Next up are ETFs tracking the STOXX Europe 600 Index. There's really only one provider worth mentioning here, and that's Amundi. The specific ETF in question is the Elixir Core STOXX Europe 600 DOR UCITS ETF Accumulating, ticker symbol MEUD. The ISIN for this ETF is LU09085000753. The expense ratio for this ETF is 0.07% or 7 basis points, which is the cheapest Europe ETF we talked about so far. You might have noticed that the ISIN began with the letters LU instead of IE, like all of the other ETFs. That's because this ETF is domiciled in Luxembourg, not Ireland. An ETF's domicile is important for tax reasons, both the taxation of the ETF itself and the taxation of the ETF investor. Ireland and Luxembourg are two of the most popular domicile locations applications for ETFs in Europe because both offer favorable tax regimes to ETFs established in their respective countries. Ireland is typically the preferred domicile location, specifically where the ETF relates to American equities. This is because ETFs domiciled in Luxembourg pay 30% withholding tax on US equity dividends, while Irish domiciled ETFs pay 15%. Withholding tax is a real cost to the ETF, so minimizing that cost insofar as possible is in the best interest of the ETF and its shareholders. However, given that we're talking about European companies, the tax treaties held by both Ireland and Luxembourg with other European countries for reduced withholding tax rates are largely the same. Not that it matters because there is no comparable ETF domiciled in Ireland. The ETF is structured as a physical ETF, it's accumulating, and it's available on DEGIRO, Trade Republic, and Trading 212, but not Book Zero. With regards to the STOXX Europe 600 index itself, it's composed of 600 European companies. The index, as at 31 December 2022, had a net market cap of 9.3 trillion euro, which is larger than both the FTSE Developed Europe and MSCI Europe indexes. The top 10 companies in the index again include the likes of Nestle, AstraZeneca, and Shell. Finally, we have the Solactive GBS Developed Markets Europe Large and Mid Cap Index. There is one ETF provider which offers two ETFs tracking this index. That provider is once again Amundi. The first ETF is the Amundi Prime Europe UCITS ETF D or C, ticker symbol PRAE. The ISIN for this ETF is LU2089238039. The expense ratio for this ETF is 0.05% or 5 basis points, making it one of the cheapest European ETFs available. The ETF is domiciled in Luxembourg, structured as a physical ETF, and is accumulating. PRAE is available on DEGIRO and Trade Republic, but not Book Zero or Trading 212. The counterpart to this ETF is the Amundi Prime Europe UCITS ETF D or D, ticker symbol PRIE. The ISIN for this ETF is LU19319742262. PRIE is distributing, whereas PRAE is accumulating. PRIE pays a dividend on a semi-annual basis, i.e. once every 6 months. PRIE is also only available on DEGIRO and Trade Republic, not Book Zero or Trading 212. With regards to the Solactive GBS Developed Markets Europe Large and Mid Cap Index itself, it's composed of 456 European companies. The fact sheet didn't include the exact market cap of the index, but did specify, as at 25th of January 2023, that within its top 10 holdings were the likes of Nestle, AstraZeneca, and Shell, similar to the other indexes that we've covered. So with all of that being said, what is the best Europe ETF for Europeans? Firstly, there isn't a real material difference between any of the 4 European stock market indexes that we've discussed, meaning an ETF tracking any one of these 4 indexes would provide you with broad exposure to European companies. The Amundi Prime Europe UCITS ETF D or C and the Amundi Prime Europe UCITS ETF D or D are the cheapest ETFs on the list, with total expense ratios of 5 basis points. Provided you don't mind owning an ETF that's domiciled in Luxembourg, one of these 2 ETFs could very well be the best option. If you would prefer an Irish domiciled ETF, either of the Vanguard ETFs or the HSBC ETFs would be good choices. Both charge total expense ratios of 10 basis points. So now that you know the best Europe ETFs for Europeans, you might want to get started with investing. Again, if you don't have a brokerage account or you want to try out a new broker, you can sign up to DEGIRO, Book Zero, Trade Republic, or Trading 212 using the links in the video description. Using these links supports me as a creator and it lets me know that you found this video to be useful. What Europe ETF do you think is best for European investors? Have I missed any contenders for the #1 spot? If so, let me know in the comments. Thanks very much for watching and I'll see you soon.